Welcome to the Busy Bays Podcast, a podcast that's all about being the ultimate marketing and business resource for auto repair shop owners. In this episode, we're going to be hitting on 8 key factors for recruiting technicians. This has been a big issue within the auto industry, and we hope to help you by taking a deeper dive into this topic. Luckily, Martin has spent quite a lot of time exploring and actually was able to present on this topic. Needless to say, we're a little excited to get started. The floor is all yours, Martin.
All right, Becca. Yeah, let's get started. 8 key factors for recruiting techs. The first one we want to talk about a little bit is the importance of creating the conditions for a great culture and work environment within your shop, and then making sure to tell everybody about that culture and that work environment.
So how exactly is a shop going to go about living by the culture that they want to create?
I think the first thing that an owner needs to do within the shop is think through what you want that work environment to be like. Make yourself a list of 4 to 5 things that you want to be able to use to describe your work environment. A lot of that should be related to how people treat each other, because that's so important to the employees of the shop. Then you want to create that list. It could be as simple as saying things like, we always say please and thank you to each other. We make sure to treat each other well. We're always there to help each other when somebody needs some help. Then you want to take that list and you want to test for it in your shop. Listen for those things and make sure that the things that you want to happen are happening. And then if not, you've got a good idea of what you might want to change, and you can put a plan together for how you want to change that. But you've got to do a good job of mentoring and teaching people about what the new reality may be like if that's not what they're used to.
Especially when they aren't doing the things you want to be happening, it needs to have a conversation about it or it's not going to be done.
And that's absolutely true. It's especially challenging if you, the shop owner, aren't living out those specific things that you want to happen. So you've got to be the prime example of what that looks like. And much to what you said, Becca, if you catch somebody not doing that, you've got to try to correct that behavior very quickly.
Your shop is kind of like a home. You're the parents, so demonstrate that behavior.
It is true.
So how would a shop implement core values in their everyday work?
And core values is one of the important pieces of this. So a way to do that is you want to set your core values. If you haven't already done that, you want to go through those. They shouldn't be aspirational, right? So they shouldn't be things that you are shooting for that maybe can't be attainable. They need to be real. Maybe if you're making some slight changes, you can do something that's a little more aspirational. Let's say you don't always say please and thank you, but you want to say, we always say please and thank you. You can expect that sort of change likely to happen. But you want to set those core values, and then you want to recognize and reward those people, those employees who embody those core values. So anytime you see somebody representing that, you want to say, hey, I saw that. You really went out of your way to say please and thank you today in the shop, and I want you to know I really appreciate that. You're really living out our core values, and I'm really impressed with the way you've adopted that.
And not only will the employees themselves appreciate that they're being recognized, but I think that the general attitude of the customers in the shop, when they see that, the interaction between the owner and a technician or even somebody who's answering the phone, that constant recognition and good relationship between one another is great for culture.
And that is absolutely true. It is a great point. Reminds me of one of the things that I like to say. I heard this a while ago, and it was related more to a brand of a business, which is that your brand is like a sponge, and the same is true of your shop culture. So no one person controls the culture. As an owner, you can do the best that you can do to create a work environment that's going to result in a very positive culture. But the culture is like a sponge, so it soaks up all the good and all the bad things that happen within your shop and between your employees, even outside of work. And that's ultimately what your culture is. So when your customers are there, they're going to experience that culture, and they may contribute to it as well. But it's important to know that you've got to always monitor and pay attention to what that is, because ultimately, everything that happens reflects or soaks into that culture.
So beyond the culture, what are some things that can make a shop more attractive to work at than another?
That is definitely a good question, and that really leads us to our next one, which is always emphasize your advantages. What I had mentioned at the beginning is make sure you've got that great culture and work environment and tell everybody about it, and I can't emphasize that enough. Have that excitement, have that enthusiasm. When things are going well, if you're at some sort of event, it could be a business event, game for kids, it could be anything, but tell people about how proud you are of that culture that you have, how you're proud of the people that work for you, how you're excited about some initiative that they're pursuing. So emphasize that as one of your key advantages. Other things that can be emphasized, especially for independent repair shops, work-life balance can be a big thing. If you're 8 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever it is, 7 to 5, something like that, Monday through Friday, that's a pretty good work-life balance for most people. If you've got the ability to be flexible, that's going to help. Maybe somebody's got to leave a little bit early a couple days a week to pick up their kids from school, or maybe they've got to be a little late a couple days a week to drop their kids off from school. Any sort of flexibility you can offer is going to be a big advantage for you. I already mentioned no weekend work, family atmosphere. If you've got that culture, people treating each other very well, it's like a family. They feel like they're taken care of. And then another one that can be really important is the opportunity to learn. Especially young people really appreciate that. Those knowing that they can go in and really learn a craft, they're going to really appreciate that.
And the opportunity just to ask questions. I mean, that's huge. And then having the space to have a conversation about what they don't know and how they can learn it. Like, I love learning, and that's huge. So you spoke to that.
It's very true. People that ask a lot of questions, unfortunately, some may take that as they're not picking stuff up, but really what it shows is they're extremely interested in learning and getting better, which we should all appreciate greatly.
So not only should the employees be asking questions, but what should a shop owner always be doing?
So here we go. One of the key points here, shop owners should always be recruiting. That is something I can't emphasize enough. I liken it to, if you're a sports fan at all, we've all been in these situations where a beloved coach might leave, or maybe a coach that you didn't expect to leaves, but you've got to consider yourself almost like you're that athletic director. If you can have that list in your desk drawer that you can pull out and say, oh, I know that I've got these 5 people that if my master tech leaves, or when my master tech leaves, I've got my list and I start at the top and I'm going to call these people to see if they're ready to make a change. It can make a huge difference in how quickly you're able to get somebody in, and then also it can make a huge difference in how much it ends up costing you, both in ability to recruit and certainly in lost revenue.
Yeah, because the question isn't if the tech is going to leave, it is when, because ultimately anything can happen in life and you always need to be prepared for that next step. So with that being said, even when a shop claims to have all of the employees they need to get the work done, to get the cars in and out day to day, why should they always be recruiting?
It is true what you said, Becky. You just don't know what's going to happen. There are certainly instances, especially when you've got a family situation where a spouse may find a job opportunity somewhere else and then they might be leaving. Your employee may have gotten recruited from another shop in the area who's willing to just go crazy and pay a ton of money.
And great culture.
and claim they have a great culture, and maybe they do. Or in that case, maybe you lose somebody to a shop that has a better reputation for better culture, but you just can't take those things for granted, and you're always going to be better off if you've got a good backup plan than if you're not prepared at all.
When you're looking for new techs, besides the fact of talking to people who are coming in, maybe somebody needs a job or their niece or nephew has knowledge and skill in the auto industry, what other things can we use to kind of help recruit?
Certainly, I think beyond typical job listings, one of the greatest opportunities you have is to utilize your website and social media. So any social media accounts that you might have. One of the things that can help you always be recruiting is just if you have an active ad on your website at all times, especially for techs. You can still draw in some applicants, and maybe you're not ready to hire, but it's still okay to have that out there.
So keep the ad out there even if you're not looking to hire?
I think it's a great idea. And if you're worried about your employees and they may be looking around thinking, hey, we don't really have a spot open, just have a conversation with them. Let them know that you're being a responsible business owner. You always want to be ready to replace somebody just in case something happens. And that's part of why you have that ad staying up on your website. Certainly the other way you can use social media and your website too is show the fun stuff you have happening at your shop. If you've got community events, if you're sponsoring somebody in the community, teams, dance teams, anything like that, get the pictures and get them up on your website, get them up on your social media.
People love that.
Absolutely. It shows your investment in the community, and that's gonna really help you attract people. If you've got an event for employees that you have happening, and don't just stop there. You can show appreciation or recognition of employees. Maybe somebody's celebrating a 5-year anniversary. Take a picture of it, put it up on your Facebook page or whatever other types of social media that you might have. Make sure to capture all those important things, because that's one of the first things that a potential candidate is going to do is they're going to go to your website. They're going to look at your Facebook page and try to get a good feel for what type of a work environment you have at the shop. And if you can show that it's a great place to work through pictures and words, then you're going to give yourself a leg up against a lot of your competition.
Yeah, if they can picture themselves even in the picture, like with that team and stuff, I think that's really important when you are recruiting.
It definitely is.
The big thing with recruiting is you want to get people before they make any big decisions on their career. So where's a place where we could start?
That's one of the other key things. To the extent that you can, you want to try to establish that talent funnel. So if you can catch them first, that might look like it could be something you do with the high schools, tech schools, community colleges. I think the earlier you can catch them, the better. You get a good feel, you give them a little bit of an experience. Maybe you try to work with your local high school and get a couple of students in a couple days a week. And just do it as a trial at the beginning. Maybe you have them for 3 hours on an afternoon and have them come in and see what their aptitude might be and what their interest is. If it doesn't work out, you just say, hey, it doesn't look like this is going to work out for either of us. Or they may be the ones that say that to you. But if it does, you might start building a relationship that leads them to be a productive employee for you after they graduate from high school. You do something like have an open house, but get the kids in the shop and let them experience what it's like.
The high school I went to actually does have a program that does this, and the high school students get to use those as credits. So one, it counts for their grade, but they're also being able to be molded in exactly what the shop owners want them to do. Teach them how to do an oil change, all the basics, all the way up to bigger things.
And that's great. Unfortunately, many more schools used to do that, and then they've moved away from that.
Off, yeah.
As we've often talked about as far as the lack of interest in trades, but it could have been nurtured lack of interest in trades, unfortunately. But that's definitely contributed to the challenge in finding techs.
Yeah, and that builds your reputation. I mean, that's so huge. If you're helping within the community, you're teaching, you're nurturing these relationships, that's huge.
It is huge because you never know who might be talking to somebody that could be a potential employee for you. So you build those relationships with the kids, you build the relationships with the teachers, you build the relationships with some admin people at the schools, and then they may be able to refer people to you that aren't even part of the program, but just because they know who you are and know you're a quality person and run a quality business, that can definitely help you a great deal.
And of course, we've all worked or heard of a story of an employer that kind of makes the job seem rosy and perfect. And then when it comes to actually getting to work, it's the complete opposite. So what advice do you have, Martin, when it comes to setting that realistic expectation?
I think as an employer, you should always be upfront and realistic. So when you are talking with somebody, whether it's just a get to know you type of a meeting or whether it's a full-fledged interview, you cannot portray your shop as some wonderful place to work if it is not that. If you've got your positive work environment built out, you've got a good culture, things are happening the way you want them to happen, then that's awesome. And you can talk about all those things. And like I said earlier, please emphasize that highly. If not, it's going to do you nor the potential interviewee any good to present a false scenario, because what's going to end up happening is they're not going to be happy when they realize they kind of got
schmoozed.
They got schmoozed. They got brought in, and it really wasn't as it was represented. And I think the best example of this is the one I always like to share. We've all fallen victim to this, right? You see a commercial on TV, and it's that fast food burger, and it just looks awesome on TV, right? And you get excited about it because you're like, oh man, that burger looks great. And usually it'll be somebody like Hardee's, right? And you're like, wow, Hardee's has really stepped up their game. That burger looks awesome. And so you're thinking, well, if I get a chance, or maybe tomorrow, I'm going to go to Hardee's and get that burger because it looks so good on the commercial. So you go to Hardee's, you're pumped, you're ready to get the burger, you go through the line and you get the burger, and already as you pick it up through the drive-through window, you look and you're like, it feels a little lighter than I expected, or maybe just a little smaller. So your excitement is starting to drop off a little bit, and then you get to where you're going and you open it up, and sure enough, it's not the burger you saw in the commercial, right? It looks like maybe the sorry twin of the burger you saw in the commercial at best. So you're no longer super excited, and you've been sold a bill of goods, like, oh, curses, they got me again. It was not the burger that you were hoping for. And what that ends up doing is it stops you from really wanting to go to Hardee's again, or whatever restaurant, and until, like a year later when they probably fool you again with something else. And you don't want to do that from an employer standpoint. You want to make sure that you're able to deliver on any promises that you make to employees.
Yeah, set the realistic expectations so that if it doesn't work out, not because you didn't set the expectation, but because somebody had to move away or something, for the next person to come in, they need to know.
Right. And one of the things I'll recommend, if you're in a position where you're not 100% where you want to be, but let's say there's something that you're really trying to focus on, and you've got somebody that you think can be really helpful, I think it's always good to have a conversation with them about that and say, hey, we're really working on having a great work environment, and one of those things is making sure to be a great teammate, to always helping somebody when they need help and not just focusing on ourselves. I think you can be a great asset to me as we work on this, and I'm going to ask you to help as we really try to work on this initiative within the shop. So, I'm going to really rely on you if you come to work here to help me with that. And I think in conversations like that, people feel like they're really part of the solution, or you're putting a lot of trust and time in them to help you solve a big issue, and that's going to be really appealing to them. Now, you don't want to put them in a position to be like a snitch or something like that, because that's probably not going to work well as far as their relationships with the other people, but you can really try to get them engaged in trying to help solve a problem positively if one exists.
Yeah, if anything, they're going to appreciate you so much more and respect you. So I'm not sure how we're going to be able to pass up this fast food burger example Martin just gave, but Martin, there's another food opportunity for you to explain.
Yeah, so this one, Becca, I always would tell people, don't be starving at the grocery store, right? We've also all got this story where maybe you've skipped lunch, you didn't get the chance to get out of the shop, other things have been going on, so it's been a long time since you ate. You're planning on stopping by the grocery store on the way home so you can pick something up, maybe for the family, right? And by the time you get to the grocery store, you're absolutely starving. And despite your best intentions of getting like a rotisserie chicken and some other healthy food like brown rice that you can make or something like that, all of a sudden you walk in, you see the candy or the chips, and you're going down the aisle and you're grabbing everything that ever looked good to you. And before you know it, you're walking out with a cart full of junk. And maybe you grab the rotisserie chicken, not going into a grocery store and reacting that way, that's also what you don't want to do when you're trying to hire somebody. It's part of the reason why you always want to be recruiting, but also you want to make sure that you're not desperate, because when you're desperate, you're going to make bad decisions, just like you did at the grocery store. If you feel like you might be in a situation of desperation, you want to ask questions about core value type things, right? So you want to make sure that somebody's going to be a good fit, especially if you've invested in work environment and culture. Fit's going to be everything to you. So you want to make sure they're going to have good chemistry. In addition to the core value questions, in order to test the chemistry, if you can, and I know this is difficult, include team members when possible. Team members that you trust, because they really fit into the culture, and maybe they've been with you for a while, and have them, give them 10 minutes. Now prep them so they can do a good job, but make sure they understand what you're hoping to get from them, and give them a chance to talk to the person so that they can kind of test out what kind of fit they think they're going to be. And oftentimes, a candidate is going to respond to questions differently, maybe more genuinely, when they're talking to a potential coworker than they would if they're talking to the big boss. Your employees may be able to get something different out of these candidates that you would be able to get yourself, and that's going to make sure that you're not starving at the grocery store and that you're not desperate and make a bad hire.
Yeah, absolutely. An entirely new perspective that's going to help you make the right decision on the next team member. Speaking of your next team member, what about number 8, Martin? What is the last key factor in hiring technicians?
This one is the ideal team player. So if you like to read business books, I can't recommend enough the Ideal Team Player book from Patrick Lencioni, because it fits perfectly in this discussion around finding good employees and how to test or how to really decide whether somebody is going to be a good employee for you. The Ideal Team Player, and it's done really well in this book. It's not one of those business books that's like a professor just giving you a lecture. Yeah, boring. It's not boring. It's told in a way that it's a story, and you can see where they're coming from, and they give great examples throughout the story. So it works excellent from that standpoint as far as being a little easier to read. But, the 3 traits of an ideal team player are that they're hungry, humble, and smart. And it's not smart like super intelligent, but it's smart as far as being people smart and working well with people. And it just does a great job in the book of going through and talking through exactly what those traits mean and how dangerous it can be if somebody only has 1 or maybe even 2 of the traits, but they don't have all 3 of the traits. And there's some good diagrams, and there's also like an index that just hits the high points of it. But it's a great guide as far as the kind of traits that you want to look for, both in good potential employees and then also in the employees that you do have, in the way you might want to evaluate them. And I will say that here at Repair Shop Websites, we think that these traits are so important that we, on an annual basis at our Christmas party, recognize one of our employees with the Ideal Team Player Award for being hungry, humble, and smart. So it's a really good book, and it's a really good model as far as traits that you want to look for in a great teammate.
Especially if you need help just manage or figuring out what kind of traits and you want in your culture. I think this would be a really great book for you to pick up and read.
That's definitely true, because it really maps it out so you can get a good understanding of what those 3 especially are.
And obviously, Martin and I, we're not shop owners.
No way, we are not.
But we do work in a company filled with motivated people, just like he said. Repair Shop Websites, we have built a culture that we've worked really hard to maintain, and we were able to maintain like a realistic culture that people can actually come to work every day with a legit expectation of what's expected of them. And that's how we are able to just continue to recruit and hire and actually keep the type of employees that we want. And I think that will be great for your shop in getting the technicians that you need to get the work done.
And a lot of it too, Becca, people talk about all these really exciting perks and all this, but what it often comes down to is just how do people treat each other.
Yeah.
And that just makes all the difference in the world.